Hey guys, welcome to Ed Puzzle number 6 in our continuing of the rise of Athens and Sparta. So last time in our video, what we were talking about, we were mentioning how in Greece the tyrants took over, and we said that the tyrants in some areas were very cruel and unjust, and we said that when people are poor and unhappy, over time they rebel. And we said that in these areas with nobles, a lot of people were happy with the nobles because they provided things like new marketplaces and different areas to worship. But most people agreed that they didn't really think that a tyrant, one person, should really take full control. So in a lot of these areas, they started to turn to oligarchies, which was a rule by joint kings. Or they turned to democracy, which was the voice of all people in government. So what we were talking about was the area of Sparta, and we said that Sparta was one city-state that became extremely strong. We said that their city-state focused on the military. And the reason they focused on the military was to create the society that was very loyal and obedient. So they stressed a lot of strength. But they also had a lot of discipline. They didn't allow for freedoms of thinking. They also didn't allow people to have a lot of stuff just to enjoy. Simplicity and strength was their main idea. So the military really drove their society. So if we look at the military, obviously that's going to affect our men by quite a bit. Okay, so if we look at males in this society, okay, all males participated in the military. So similar to like a citizen army, in those other city-states, these males who are citizens are also going to be a part of the army, whether they own land or not, though. So all males are involved. So boys and men are going to prepare for a life of war. So if we think about this, when does the military start? In Sparta during this time, the military started for these men when they were still children. So at age 7, boys are going to leave their home and they're going to join the military. During these ages, okay, what they're going to do is train. Okay, they're going to learn how to read and write. And they're going to use weapons. They're going to be trained in strategy and so on. Now these boys, even though they're just kids, were treated pretty harshly because they believed at this time that if they were treated harshly, it would make these boys into men very quickly. It would kind of, give them tough skin, that they would be prepared for the dangers of battle and for this idea of death that might come. Okay, so they treated them really harshly to prepare them for those instances as they got older. If we look at how it goes on after that, so at age 7 they go in, they have some type of schooling to read and write, but most of their training revolves around the military. They officially enter the army at age 20, so this is the time where they would actually go off and fight in different conflicts and so on. In their 20s they are able to marry, but they're not able to live at home. So if they did get married, their wife would stay home and then they would actually go back to the camp. Okay, so they lived in military camps with the rest of the soldiers, and then they could visit every so often at home. At age 30, now they can live at home, but if there was any sort of conflict that was going on, they would be called back into battle to fight. The only way that they were able to get out of the army was at age 60, they were able to retire. Okay, so if they were able to make it to age 60, they were able to retire and then go home and live the rest of their life with those freedoms. The rest of those men that were not in the military anymore were just simply those that died in conflict or battle or disease and so on. Now the one thing is, so if we look at the male side, their life is really hard. If you were a woman in ancient Greece, Sparta may have been the place that you wanted to live. Since those men were off in the military for so long, from age 7 all the way through their 30s, okay, women actually had more responsibility in Sparta than they did in any other place. Okay, with those responsibilities came more freedom. Since the men weren't there, somebody had to take care of the land. Somebody had to run the business. All right, so in Sparta, women were able to have these privileges. So they were able to own land, they were able to travel, they could own their own business. They kind of ran things. So in Sparta, women actually had a lot of those same responsibilities that the men had in other places. Girls also were trained in sports. At this time, throwing javelin was very common. Type of wrestling was common for women as well. All women were required, not that they were at their house every day, but there was this momentum to be physically fit. And the reason they wanted these women to be physically fit was because they could fulfill their duty as a mom. Okay, they're physically fit to raise these boys into men. Okay, so they wanted strong soldiers, and they figured that came at home in those ages of 0 to 7, and that was all based on the mom. Okay, so mothers knew at this time, as they prepared these men for battle, they knew that their son would either die in battle or win the war. Okay, that's what they fully expected, nothing less. Everything, again, revolved around this military aspect. If we look at the government in Sparta, they decided to have an oligarchy. So that was where you have a few different leaders making the decisions for all. So in Sparta, what they had was 2 kings that ruled jointly. So if we look at the power of the kings, they really had 2 jobs. They led the army, because that was pretty much what their society was based on, and they also carried out different ceremonies. Now, some other governing bodies that they had in Sparta were 2. They had the Assembly and the Council of Leaders. All of these were made up of male citizens, okay, and they had to be over the age of 30, right? So if we look at the, the assembly, this group of males, okay, these citizens are going to make the decisions about war and peace. Remember, their goal is to take over land to gain power and wealth, okay, and they're going to figure out where are we going to go, where are we not going to go, when are we going to be at peace. So the assembly are the men that did that. The Council of Leaders were considered the most powerful group of people in the government, and they're going to deal with the law aspects. Okay, so they're mostly going to serve as judges. They're going to sentence people to prison or to a life of exile outside of Sparta. And each year, 5 people would be chosen as ephors. Okay, these ephors, what they're going to be is like the main official. They're going to enforce the laws, and they're going to manage the taxes. So these 5 men, outside of the kings, also had a great deal of power. Now, with the strict government, there was a lot of stability in the land. Everybody was the same. That was stable. They did not have a lot of revolts, okay, because everyone was so disciplined and loyal to Sparta. Okay, the problem was that with these strict rules, they restricted really all these freedoms, like freedom to think and have new ideas. So that was discouraged. They didn't want people to think at this time. They didn't want to embrace education because they really believed that these freedom of thinking and education would lead to people wanting change. Sparta didn't want change. They liked their society. Those that have more of an education are more likely to question what's going on and come up with different ideas of how to make it better. Okay, so by discouraging these items, what they're going to do, they're actually going to put themselves at a disadvantage, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. They didn't welcome any foreign visitors into their land. They also didn't allow Sparta to leave to new lands and come back, because again, it deals with this idea of new things. Okay, if they left the land and went to Athens and learned all these new things and came back and said, well, maybe we should try things, that would cause unrest, and the government was trying to avoid that. People in Sparta were not embracing education. Males learned how to read and write, but they didn't learn anything else. So no literature, no art, no arithmetic or anything like that. Okay, their sole purpose was training for army and then to read and write. Now, with this discouraging of ideas, what's going to happen is they're going to put themselves at a disadvantage because all other areas at this time are going to embrace technology, this idea to try new things, okay, but not Sparta. So they're still using like iron bars for money. All other city-states moved on to coins. Well, if everyone else moved on to coins, nobody's going to trade with Sparta because they aren't using the same type of currency. Okay, so that affects Sparta because they isolated themselves. They were the only ones using iron bars. So what's going to happen? They're going to remain this poor agricultural community while everybody else moves on in different businesses and trades. Okay, so that's one disadvantage. Okay, so if we look at Sparta's goal, their goal is to have a strong military, which they did. Okay, that's going to help them as Greece is going to be invaded by other empires. Okay, but if we look in society, okay, Sparta's going to be at that disadvantage. Now, if we look at Athens, Athens is going to be a democratic society. So they're just northeast of Sparta. We can see their little star on the map there. And just to the left on that peninsula, that's the area of Sparta. So if we look at the Athens, their ancestors are going to be the Mycenaeans, and Athens is going to grow up and they're going to embrace very different things than Sparta did. So the biggest difference is instead of embracing the military strength, they're going to embrace education. So they believe that men who are strong in body and mind are going to become good leaders, and Athens is going to be powerful that way. So in Athens, education was promoted. They're going to study all topics, not just reading and writing, but they also looked at public speaking and math and arts and everything like that. Okay, most males participated in sports. They went to school until 18 and then they were graduated. At this time, they were expected to become active in public affairs. So they will attend debates, they would go to areas to vote on laws, so they have to be active in their community. Women, on the other hand, were very traditional. So if we think about the women's role, all right, women's role was to stay at home, take care of the kids, take care of the home. They were educated by their moms. Only the wealthy learned how to read and write. The women's goal, just like traditional areas, was to get married, raise kids, and take care of their house. So very traditional in Athens. No women were considered citizens. They couldn't own land. They couldn't own a business. They didn't work in a business or in the government. If we look at Athens, this part is very similar to what we talked about before. So they overthrew the nobles, and then they had these tyrants that took over for a while. And then what's going to happen is that they're going to want to avoid these rebellions. So the nobles that were in power agreed to change, and they're going to name a new leader whose name is Solon. Okay, Solon is going to be considered the first citizen in Athens, and what he's going to do, he's going to go out and help the people. So he's going to end all the debts that were there. So if they couldn't afford land, that debt was taken away. He freed those who were enslaved because of debt, and he gave them land. He opened the government up, and he's going to give them a chance to actually have a good life. Okay, so if we look at Solon, he creates this assembly of 400 people, okay, all male citizens, and it's their job to write and pass laws. So in Sparta, we had those 2 kings, and then we had the assembly and the council of leaders. In Athens, we have Solon, but we have 400 people that are going to help in this government. Okay, very different. Now, Solon was praised by most in the beginning, but as all leaders, some thought that he helped the poor too much, and the wealthy thought they weren't being helped enough. So Solon is going to be later replaced, okay, by a man in 560 BC called Pisistratus. He becomes the new leader. Now, Pisistratus, again, is going to enforce democracy. This is the big key in Athens. So what he's going to do is divide up these large estates where the noble was the leader, and he's going to give that land to all these people that don't have land, so that's good. Okay, he's going to give out loans so people could get equipment and new weapons. He also got rid of those citizenship laws. So he's going to say any male in Athens is a citizen, whether or not you own land. The poor people, he's going to hire them. He's going to give them jobs so they can earn a living. A lot of them made public buildings and temples and so on. Pisistratus also embraced this religion aspect. This idea of mythology. He's going to start building statues of different gods. He really focused on the goddess Athena, and we'll talk more about her in the next unit. But he put statues of Athena all up around Athens, hence the name Athens, based on the goddess of Athena. A lot of festivals were held there in athletic contest. Now, most leaders at this time stop being the leader because they either step down or because they retire. Or step down, or they pass away. So Pisistratus is going to pass away, and a guy named Cleisthenes takes over. Again, these 3 men, all the same, are really focused on this democracy. How can we get more people involved in the government? Okay, so he's going to make that assembly the governing body of Athens. If we think of the assembly, it's kind of like our Congress at this time. So the people there would help write and vote on laws. They would discuss cases. They would appoint army officials and so on. So if we look at Cleisthenes' rule, he creates a council of 500 people. Their job is to introduce new ideas, okay, and figure out how are they going to manage like different things between city-states. Okay, the one thing he did, he elected a lottery to get these men onto the council. All right, so he didn't want people to be appointed or voted on because he thought the poor was left out. So in a lottery, he would simply draw names, and those would be the 500 people involved, meaning all citizens had a chance to serve on his government body. So under Cleisthenes, Athens became very democratic. The only thing we have is still that exclusion of some people. So women were not considered citizens, people from foreign lands, and also the slaves. And this is where we're going to stop for today. In our next section, we're going to talk about an empire off to the west named Persia.